Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. We are where we answer your questions 7 days a week. Now, if you want to ask those questions, of course, you can go to Makana. You can ask the questions. You can vote on the questions. You can chat about the questions. If you don't know what Makana is, go to officehours.global/join, and you can sign up there, and you'll get an email that'll show you how to get into Makana, how to get into Discord. If you don't want to do any of those things, you can just go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global. You can ask questions there 24/7, and then we'll feed them slowly into the show. So askofficehours.global. Remember, you can ask those any time of the day. Let's go ahead and jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes this morning from John Nichols in Concord, California. And John says, I have a MixPre 6 for my audio interface for microphones and headphones. I use an ATEM for my video interface. It's connected to a Sony A7IV camera. I want to add delay to my audio for sync. How can I do that?
Yeah, you should, in the MixPre 6, you should be able to delay the outputs. So, and you don't want to delay you're not going to delay the inputs, but you'll delay the outputs. The inputs have a very small delay, I believe, available to them, but the outputs will have, I think, up to 1,000 milliseconds of delay. So, if you're using them there, go ahead and go into outputs, and I think it's on the second page, and you should be able to then delay those outputs. And I believe, I can look at my 6 here. Hold on. So if I click on here, I can't show you this. I don't have a way to show you the, but if I go in here and I go to outputs, and then it is the second page, and you have stereo out left delay and stereo out right delay. And right now, for instance, mine is set to about 160 milliseconds. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC. And Alexander asks, we have a countdown clock on black background with the podcast's logo before we go live and the live stream starts. My co-host uses a Hyperdeck to play things back. I want people to see us talking on camera during the countdown, but have us really dim until the start for effect.
Okay.
How?
Go, Jesse.
Here's a really kind of dirty way to do that. We're going to switch over to our ATEM controller. And right now we're on camera 2, which is the feed of our desktop. And I'm going to preview black, but not cut to it. And you can see we can use the T-bar to transition halfway. And that's how it would work there. Let's take a look at the exact same thing, but on a human face. So we're going to preview black, and now you can see that I'm talking under black. And you could have, instead of using black, you could use input 4 for your Hyperdeck and have the countdown clock on top of me. That's the kind of dirtiest, quickest way that I would consider doing this.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to make that actually happen. You can we talked about it. I think there's a couple questions here that might be here from yesterday because some questions ended up in both places. The one thing to think about there is that you could, the cleanest way to do this is probably to create a image that is create an image that is literally has a opacity in the alpha channel, and then use pre-multiply and simply just set it on top of it without any kind of adjustments or and then what you do is you have your countdown clock on top of that key properly. Connect those via you want to connect those with a macro so they both turn on and turn off at the same time. That's probably the cleanest way to do that. But as we talked about a little bit last night, one thing that you could do is simply put the countdown clock over black, put it up there, and just play with the controls that you have in the downstream key, in the Luma key. You're going to Luma key that over and just play with the softness of it, and what you'll see is it'll start to darken. Usually we spend a lot of time trying to avoid that, but you could do it that way as well. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith comes up next from Chautauqua, New York. I've been beta testing the PTZOptics Hive, and so far so good. Has anyone else tested with this, and have you had any issues during non-PTZOptics cameras like I have?
Adding the non-PTZOptics cameras. Anytime you're mixing cameras, you're going to have a hard time getting the color just right. So a lot of times we do everything we can to use the same make and model of cameras, or at least the same make of cameras, because the color science is different with each one of them. It's not impossible, but it is very difficult to mix and match cameras and have them all match. So sometimes you can get away with it because, let's say your reverse cameras are a different style, or your overhead camera is a different style. But if all of them are going to see people's faces, you will have a hard time getting everything just exactly right across all those cameras. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. And Paul says, any thoughts on the audio and video production values of last night's opening Dems Convention in Chicago, particularly the cut-to-graphics speaker backgrounders?
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I watched a little of it. I was had a busy schedule last night, but I watched early. And for me, the more interesting things, I didn't pay that much attention to graphics, to be honest with you. I did notice the big central screen behind them seemed to work pretty well. They were doing a lot of switching there, more than I actually thought. They weren't using it just as IMAG, but they were running a lot of content in there as well. So obviously they had to run a show that was pretty complex. The other thing that I noticed, just because I've watched political things on both sides for a long time, how much better the coverage from the show floor when they went out into the delegations. That's always been a hard thing because those are packed with bodies, and remote contribution used to be something where I would see a lot of failure. I didn't see much. It seemed like the shots from the show floor were clean, the audio was clean, everything seemed to function properly, which I thought was just a plus for everybody who did the design in the tech crew, particularly since there was that big switch, and we'll talk about that. But I know that a lot of the run of the show that had been planned for months in advance probably had to change at the end, all the graphics, lower thirds, and all those things. So hats off to the tech crew for getting all those things done with a minimum of time.
Next question.
Next question comes to us again from Zach Stahlsmith in Chautauqua, New York. And Zach says, perhaps this is more of a Sunday discussion question, but how might you deal with clients who don't understand technology, but panic even when things go right, demand workflows that don't work, but the money is still good?
Go, Jesse.
So when I'm working with clients, we can negotiate my time and they can buy it. We can negotiate my expertise and they can buy it. What's not up for negotiation is my happiness, and you are allowed to let clients go. There's no amount of money anybody could give me to take away peace of mind. And you don't have to do it harshly or meanly. You can do it very gently and very sweetly, and kind of, you don't even have to do it. You can just let the relationship expire if you want to, but we do not negotiate peace of mind. That's not on the table.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think that's a good process. We've only had to do it twice in my entire career to actually actively resign a client. In the first case, it was literally someone who was incredibly difficult to work with, and you're brushing against that. With a client who kind of doesn't really understand what the normal parameters of the work are and constantly is just making everything more difficult, at some point I agree with Jesse 100%. The mental and psychological toll of a client who can't get their act together can drag down your entire shop and operation. So you have to protect yourself against that. In the other case, it was a relative of mine who had a huge client in their business, and it was a name that you would recognize, and everybody was saying, oh my gosh, this is a linchpin. This will help you grow your business gigantically. Well, they were so difficult to work with that they even had to resign them. And it was a delicate dance. You want to not burn bridges because maybe it's just one or two people who are being given too much latitude and don't know how to manage their work, and they're projecting all that stress and strain on their relationships with their vendors, regardless of why it's happening. Your first goal is to protect everyone in your organization if you lead that organization, and that can mean just toxic personalities, if they show up and are causing you that much stress, have to be gently and comfortably removed, or your shop's not going to survive that. My 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that, I'm fortunate right now that I have a lot of great clients, or we have a lot of great clients that are really great to work with. But I think in the past, one of the things that we've looked at is when a client is difficult to work with, if you can figure out there is a combination to them that I look at, that there's a combination that I haven't figured out yet that would make that work well. And I think that it's a really great skill to build. So for me, they've always been projects. Like, how do I figure this out? This is a little Rubik's Cube or something, or a lock. How do I unlock that process? And a lot of it has to do with setting some boundaries. It's also one of the reasons that we oftentimes keep our production staff away from our clients, not just because there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that the clients will make requests directly to the production staff that will destabilize the event. People will just say yes, but they don't know what all the other things are. You really have to have them always talking to the producer. So having the clients, only talking to their coordinator or producer, it also means you have to have coordinator and producers that can kind of manage the process of that. The other thing that you want to look at is, because I'll tell you, clients that are difficult, and if you figure out how to work with them, and you figure out what that combination is, it's just work forever because no one else wants to work with them. And so the thing is that they're a real opportunity for you if you can figure out how to work with them effectively. There's a real opportunity there to kind of work out a lot of may have a really good business there, but you got to figure that out. And sometimes there have been clients that I haven't been able to figure it out, and usually I just get busy. I don't tell them anything. I don't have any, I don't create any, like, we're going to have a meeting about this. I just simply, when they call, because with everybody, you have to make time and move time around. And I just say, well, we can't do that project right now. And so that's usually been the way that we've kind of moved because it also leaves the opportunity open to do more work if it makes sense. So I think that I usually don't feel the need to have any, to create any kind of bit there. But I think that you want to look at when they're panicking also, why are they panicking? Don't always think that it's because of them. Like I have a lot of, we had to teach people in our company in a lot of ways of how to talk to the client so that they don't panic. And a lot of it has to do with not giving them more information than they need, and not being, candid with them and not letting them, there's a lot about when clients panic, especially when things aren't working, you really want to take that on like a project for yourself as well. What are you doing? Because all you can control, I'm not saying it's your fault, Zach. Like I'm saying that you want to always know that the only thing you can control is you. So if someone's doing something that isn't what you want them to do, look at what you're doing and try to figure out what is that causes them to do that, that I'm doing. So because that's the part you can control. And if you look at something, there's a lot of things that I'm, generally when you, when I work on a project, you'll notice that oftentimes that I'm very low key. I don't say everything's going great. I don't say anything's going bad. I usually am managing a lot of things that I wish were better, but I'm not talking to the client about it all the time, and I'm surely not letting them sit there and watch it. so that I don't watch them let them watch how the sausage is made as we try to figure out things that didn't work out. And so there's all this stuff because I know it'll all get sorted out. And if it becomes a problem that is really going to be an issue, of course, I'm going to talk to the client about it. I'm also not going to, have them, I'll say like, push back on things gently about things that are there. So I think that there's a lot of room there of development to do on your side as well, to just figuring it out. Don't let other people in your production pipeline hold control over your ability to get things done. Look at them providing you an opportunity to improve how you interact with folks around it. Again, not like it's your fault, but like you're the only one that can do that. And and if you get good at it, I know some. I was just talking to my cousin Nancy. I'm glad to be back, by the way. Hi, everybody. I was in Arizona. I drove through the Grand Canyon and Flagstaff and saw the crater. I went to Winslow, Arizona, took pictures with the eagles, the statue of them. We went
standing
to Sedona,
on the corner.
I spent the most of the time in Tucson, where my family, where I was born, and where my family is, and I have a couple of my family spend a lot of time on horses. And are very, very, very good. There's a point to this, I promise. So, I used to race horses as well, and so I race quarter horses, specifically racing quarter horses, which are mostly thoroughbreds that have a little bit of quarter horse in them. That's what it feels like anyway. And they're just nuts, And so I had this one horse. We called her the Gray. And she kicked me. She'd try to throw me. There was all this stuff that would happen all the time. And I had to ride her because they're mares. We have to keep them in shape. So we take them out for rides all the time. So I spent a lot of time riding too. I just thought that I just cringed every time I had to get on that horse. And it was really fast, but it was really crazy. My cousin Nancy came out to visit. She said, let's go out on the trail. I said, well, we don't have a lot of trail horses because this one horse is just, crazy. And Nancy got up on that horse. She saddled the horse, got up on that horse. That horse looked like it was going to do something. She goes, hey, and she pulls in. That horse was then the perfect little horse for the rest of the trip. I have never forgotten that lesson. Like, that horse acted like it was a really calm, trail horse the whole time, like the one that you would get that you put your kids on. And Nancy just sit there and just rode that horse around like it was nothing. And I learned it was an incredibly valuable lesson of understanding what I was bringing to that crazy horse. That I was showing upset and fear and all kinds of other things, and she wasn't going to put up with it. And it immediately sorted itself out. And I think when I have trouble with clients, I think about that experience all the time. Like, what am I doing to have that happen? Because that horse, I thought that horse was barely rideable. Like, I could ride it, but just barely. And she just made it seem like nothing. So you always want to know that it may be something that you're doing as well. Yeah, go ahead, Jesse.
Did you tune into Crater Radio when you were out near the crater?
I didn't. But we did.
What are you even doing?
We did a really great tour though. The guy gave us a little tour along the outside edge, and there's this really interesting about limestone. It turns out when a meteor hits the Earth, it liquefies the limestone, but there's so much pressure it pushes it back into a rock. But it's really rough. Limestone's usually smooth. And it's really rough, and it turns out there's only 2 times that happens: is when a meteor hits the Earth and when a nuclear bomb goes off. And because of that, we were able to identify, because of studying that, we were able to identify that in iridium. We were able to identify all the meteor hits on the Earth, or many. Not all. I don't know how many there have been, but many. And that's how they kind of unraveled where the actual big one hit. And so I found. The crater is much more interesting than you would think it would be when you see it. Oh, it's a big hole in the ground, but it is a fascinating crater. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
One of my most interesting shoots, I had to do something, and I was living in Phoenix at the time, and we had a shoot at Four Corners, and so we booked a small plane. There was just my cameraman and I and the pilot in the plane, and we went directly across Meteor Crater, and I was able to ask the pilot to go across a couple of times from different heights. It is a singularly amazing thing to be able to circle that, to see its geologic formation. I can't think of another place on Earth that has something like that. And I came away from that as impressed as I have with anything else. Just suddenly that thought of the cosmos and everything that's happening and what can happen. It's a beautiful place, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely worth it. If you may go by and think it was just a big hole in the ground, but I would highly recommend checking it out. It's pretty cool. And so I was surprised. I didn't know if my kids would like Sedona, but they really enjoyed it. And they want to move there. I don't know if they want to move there, but they really liked it. They're like, this would be great. I was like, I don't think we can afford Sedona.
It's become pretty expensive over the course of time. It is a stunningly beautiful place.
It is amazing. I was amazed by how great Flagstaff was. It's like like Tahoe. I mean, it really is like Flagstaff is very much like Tahoe. Like it's just that as a California
college town in the Pines. It's a beautiful place too.
That's great. Next question.
Chester Sweeney's up next from Las Vegas, Nevada, and Chester asks, least favorite mic, camera, and background combo to see someone on Zoom.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I'm going to go with laptop camera, laptop mic, and any fake background. I'd take the blur over the fake background, but please, just regular background is fine unless you're covering something up that you cannot show because it's a professional environment.
Go ahead, Bill.
Any combo that injects instability that is random. I can't tell you the number of times I've been on some little Zoom outfit and it works for 3 days, and the 4th day you have glitches, and the 5th day you don't have the glitches, and then you're always just living in fear. What if this becomes unstable again? And, particularly if you have to do important meetings, if you're, this is something that's mission critical for your work, there's nothing that interrupts the flow of a meeting and gets everybody ticked off more than, oh gosh, they're back, they're gone, they're back, they're gone, I can't hear them, I can hear them. I prize stability. So that's one of the reasons I think a lot of us have invested so much in our Zoom setups, is that we want to know when we turn on the switch and the system comes up that it's going to stay up the whole time I have to work with it, and then I can turn it off.
I've been kind of surprised at how suddenly we're getting close to prepping people into a business, because there's more and more people are asking us. I think more and more people are realizing that that this is not going to end, and that they really need to look good when they're on TV or when they're on Zoom and so on and so forth. So I think you're going to see a lot more happening here. Next question.
Andy Shaw in London comes up next. As part of an install, I have a lectern mic that needs to connect via Dante to a mixer in a cupboard. I need something small that can sit inside the lectern and provide phantom power, preamp for the mic, and convert this to Dante. Any thoughts? Thanks.
Some version of, I don't know if I have the exact answer for you, but some version of Studio Technologies presenter connections would work. I wasn't able to quite find the right model that doesn't do anything other than that. But what I have here is a Model 205. This is a Studio Technologies. If you look at a Studio Technologies Model 205, and it's got a mic input, so it'll do everything you're asking for. It has, it's small. I can't pick it up because it's all wired in, but it's about this big. It is, so David Brady said a Studio Technology Model 252. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this is right. This is good. Let me pull this over here. Let me pop it up here. Great, David. David was in the chat and he threw it in there. So here. This is what you're looking for. So this is a mic line to Dante interface. So this is going to have your phantom power. It's going to be a preamp, and it's going to convert this to Dante. So you'll see the back here you can see the channel 1 and channel 2 of it, and then you have the Ethernet that's there. And this is going to be PoE, so you just give it some power through your Ethernet connection, and it'll put 2 channels on there, and that will show up as a Dante device for Dante controller, and then you can send it wherever you want. And I think a lot of us use a lot of Studio Technologies, especially for this kind of thing. The difference between this one and the one that I have, mine doesn't have some of the pretty meters on the front, but it has a mute switch on it. So if you get some of the ones that are designed for announcers, you could have mute switches. I don't know if you'd want that for what you're doing here, but that's where you start to look at it. But we had Gordon on a couple months ago. Studio Technologies is the go-to for this kind of thing. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas comes up next. Techcrunch is having a free online seminar on AI today at noon Central. Is Techcrunch a good source, and will you check it out? And he's got a link there to the thing.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, Techcrunch seems fine. When I'm reading it, it seems to be well-written, well-reasoned articles. They don't seem to be too deep in the clickbait pocket. The upcoming AI seminar is getting your data ready for the age of AI. I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that. I tried to read through the description, but I'm not exactly sure what they're selling. But hey, they're not selling it at a high price, so why not poke your head in and see what's on their minds?
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Robert Linkrum in Belmont Shores, California. There's a new Sony Z200 camcorder. Thoughts? And he's got a link there.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Yeah, we've got the PXWZ200 and HXR NX800 coming out. We're going to take a quick look at those. These are 1-inch CMOS sensors, 24 to 480 millimeter zoom, and that's actual zoom, not digital zoom in post. There is further digital zoom that you can do up to 40 times if you're shooting HD. And yeah, looks like it ticks all the boxes of a new camcorder. I don't think it's like a drop everything you're doing and go out and buy it right now type thing, but it looks like a good piece of kit. If you were looking to get a new piece of kit that does exactly what that thing does, it should work fine.
Go ahead, Bill.
And now with AI, according to their promotional material, I was sitting there watching it, and I guess it's doing some of the things that AI on your computer is doing, particularly in terms of matting out a subject that you're shooting in video so that you can key them probably easier. That's my guess anyway. It's interesting that they have the M200 and the NX800, and I guess they're both the same thing, just in different formats. One of them XD Cam, one of them NX Cam, which is kind of Sony's thing. So that's interesting that now we're seeing the encroaching of, quote, AI, whatever they mean that to be, into the video camera space, the way it's already pretty heavily coming into both the computer and the still photography space.
I go with Jesse.
And the AI, Sony's AI is actually really good for subject tracking, autofocus, things like that. So a lot of times you see AI and you're like, okay, guys, marketing team, settle down. But in Sony's case, I'm going to give them the seal of approval. Their AI implementation is really kind of best in class.
I think it also just depends on what you're going to shoot with it. I think that there is an argument for a camera that you can just pull out of the bag and do a run and gun. Like that's what this is really designed for. That you're gonna pull it out, you're gonna throw it up, maybe do some corporate video for it, and so on and so forth. I don't really shoot with 1-inch sensors. I mean, I'm usually Super 35 or larger, but I think that there's definitely folks that do need to be able to just have a camera in a bag and not have a kit. A lot of us have a tendency to have cameras that turn into an art project as you build it up. So that's not the case here. This is just you just turn it on and go. So I think there's an argument for that if you're that kind of shooter. I don't know how many of that kind of shooter are out there anymore, but maybe. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Chester says, has anyone had the sudden situation at a live gig where everyone had to switch from digital to analog to keep the show going, or vice versa, and did it work well?
I didn't have exactly that. I mean, going all the way from digital to analog is not something that you can usually do. The closest that I got, I was thinking about that question because it was sitting in our queue, and I was trying to figure out what would be like that. We had a situation where we had a pretty big event, and we had a truck. I think I've told this story before, but you probably haven't heard it, Chester, so I'll tell it to you. Is that we had a truck, and we had two big cat generators, and only one was running overnight for the first 3 days of rehearsal because they didn't want to pay for the gas, $6,000 a day. So the idea was we would turn the second one on the morning of the event, about 6 a.m. 3 a.m., the cat blew a head gasket and went out, dropped our truck off of power, and the folks at CAT just threw it into another one. They just wanted to have the truck up when we got there. The problem was that it damaged the router. There was a router there, and so the router has two cards, and so we were really worried, but we figured we had to get over to we had to make sure that we had the backup all ready to go. And in that process, we lost the router for the rest of the show. And what happened was our TD and our truck engineer figured out how to hard patch all the cameras and monitors directly into the Sony switchers, big Sony switcher, and that's as close as we got to doing that. It was a very stressful moment, and we still started on time. So it was a close call. And so, but that really leads you to understanding why it's important to have a great crew, because there's not that many people that would know that system well enough to be able to pull it together in a pinch. And we were still able to get the show off the ground. So that's having a good crew is the key. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Robert White in Jacksonville, Florida. Are motorized faders, really that important for a digital mixer? iPad only seems convenient, but are motorized sliders that much better?
I go, Bill.
It depends on your practice. I mean, if you're doing, live work, motorized faders don't necessarily, unless you want to do scene presets and switch between them, they're not going to do you that much good. If it's just the speaker, he starts talking and he or she continues through the whole course of the thing, you're not going to be doing much changing. Where it really became gigantic, and I think Rupert Neve was the original with their NECAM automation. What it really shines for is if you're doing something like a mix down of a song and you want to mix things to your particular taste and then have the system snapshot that and be able to recreate it consistent with timecode tracking of the actual playback of the audio. It means that you can mix a section, snapshot all of those moves, play them back while you mix the next section, and so forth until you get exactly the changes that you want happening in real time through the playback of the song. If you're doing anything like that, automation is mission critical these days because it lets you store and then adjust all of your changes to taste by going through the piece that you're playing back multiple times. So it just really depends on what you do. There are a lot of uses where it will do you no good at all, And there are some things where it'll make or break your workflow. So horses for courses.
Go, Jesse.
This may sound frivolous, but we are in show business, and the importance of that moment when the client is sitting next to you at the board and the board powers up and it goes "hunk," and they go, "Oh," it cannot be overstated.
Anytime I possibly can, I want motorized sliders. It just really makes so much. Knowing where you are, because a lot of times you're going through different pages on the switcher, and you want to. They're all in different places, and so it is. I find that being able to look down and reach down, have it immediately give me that update. I don't think that it's absolutely necessary. I mean, I'm working on designing some interfaces for audio that would, be a software interface on an iPad that will let me do some of those things. I don't think it's as good, but I do like the idea. I mean, when we start thinking about, one of the things I'm trying to think through as we look at like what we do with extra hours, we had another great extra hours last night, is how do we set something up that's really just all screens, so that that we're not, so someone can jump in to run the show and have multiple controls that are open, but we're not doing anything that requires specialty hardware on the other end. And so that's one of the thought processes there. And I, that's going to be that's what we're kind of working through. So I am trying to figure out how that interface would look if we were doing it with either a touch screen or with a mouse or something like that to make those adjustments. Next question.
David Brady in New York City says, what is the easiest way to create an animated map of a particular route through the streets of Manhattan? Can Apple Maps be programmed this way, or is this a job for Google?
Go ahead, Jesse.
I'm going to give you a slightly different approach. And what we like to do is get an actual physical paper map and put the camera on a slider with a nice 50 mil 1.8 and do a slow pass over the map. Maps are really good for motion tracking because there are dots everywhere on the map. We drop this into After Effects and do the animation of the route that we want to take and motion track that to the actual map. And it just feels so nice to have the actual physical thing in front of you when you're watching it, to have an actual physical object that's being shot with an actual physical camera instead of a digital representation of a map.
Go ahead, Bill.
And this is an area where plugins are your best friend. Most of the big systems, and I use it with Motion and Final Cut, but I think it's available for everything out there. You can find packages that allow you to put markers on the cities or on the places on a map that you want to go. And then it will allow you to figure out which kind of animation do you want between it. Do you want a little plane icon to come up and land in the next place or things like that? I know that my friends at Ripple Training have a really good package for that. And I think there's a lot of other things where you can buy something and it just takes a lot of the drudgery out of making a really nice look map point-to-point animation.
I do think that probably one of the best ones is Google Earth, because you can map those things together, and so Google Earth is still the as far as 3D goes, lets you running maps, and you've got 3D buildings, and you've got the whole Earth at your disposal. You can set waypoints and you can render it out. So I still think that I don't know what the pro version of Google Earth is now, but the pro version of Google Earth has got some great tools to make that actually happen. Next question.
Henry Ramos in Yonkers, New York says, any desire to cover NAB New York this year?
There is. We just have to figure. We've had so many moving parts that we have to figure out how that would actually work. We got to make sure that that it's paid for up front, so everything's figured out. So we may see what there. If it is, it'll be lighter. We may only go with a live view. I really want to do the two-way connection, but I just don't know if it's a I just don't. We just have to make sure that we have it. I don't think we will in New York do the studio. And I'm not sure we'll do the studio again. We'll see that we had before, but we may. The reason for that is that I felt like the handheld experience was so compelling that I'm a little hesitant to go back to the studio. I felt like the studio was good, but the handheld was great. The studio was there to kind of give us our handheld a rest. My temptation is to have just two handhelds. and wander around, as opposed to, so let them rest each other and not have a studio involved. I do think the studio made sense for people who didn't have anything else to say, but part of me just wants to talk to them standing somewhere, and not have to think about that. And also so there's some adjustments to those kits that I might make, but that's kind of where I'm sitting right now. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, unless David Brady can host 30 people, the thing that got me was New York is so expensive, a place to grab even a small place. The hotel rooms are super expensive, and so you're talking probably a couple $1,000s to do anything as somebody coming in to do something, even for 3 days, and that puts it out of the range of most people who aren't local. And while we have local people, they're probably not enough to do the whole thing. So yeah, it's a heavy lift.
Yeah, no, I'm there with you on that one. So I don't think it's going to happen. But if there's enough people that ping me about it, maybe we can try to figure out something. Maybe even if it was run by folks that are in New York, that might be also another possibility. Next question.
Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. Liberty is up next. Yesterday, Russell Kaye broke the news during our show that Phil Donahue had passed away. I'd love to hear your thoughts on his legacy. This show is part of his legacy. Me, growing up, usually when you were sick, you ended up laying around on the bed watching TV in my age, and so in the 80s we would watch him, and we'd watch Phil Donahue ask questions and have a conversation and realize like how much it just meant, how much you could do between Phil Donahue and Oprah, how much of the show is just a conversation, and a conversation with the audience there. And we've taken it to a different scale here. But I think that definitely impacted my view of what's possible or what could or should be done when it comes to a conversation. Bill? Yeah, I think honestly he took the torch that had been started with Dave Garroway and all those guys in terms of live television or something that felt live and moved it into a whole new era. I think his impact on coverage, daytime television, conversation, as Alex says, is pretty hard to estimate. I mean, he drew a huge audience, and just that conversational, I'm your friend, I'm not the pontificator up here on the stage, but I'm down with you, working with you, and trying to bring your story to the public. I don't think his impact on this industry can be overestimated. He seemed like a really good guy who did a really good work, and that's why he sustained for such an incredibly long career. I'm trying to think of anybody. There are a few people who have that kind of longevity now, but boy, he sure did pioneer that. Next question. Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Thoughts on this new AI assistant editor? Quick way to try different combinations or harbinger of an automated post-production future? And he's got a link there to something called Eddie Edits. Go ahead, Jesse.
So Eddie Edits is an AI editing piece of software. It's dialogue driven. We'll take a quick look at it right now. Eddie AI requires an email address to log in. It's not a confirmed email address, so you can type in gibberish at nonsense.com and get access to the surface levels of the tools. And what it does is you can load in a YouTube video, and Eddie asks you what you want to do. And I told it, so we've got Paul Rudd on Hot Ones right here. I said, select clips of Paul Rudd looking uncomfortable. So it went through the video and picked out 5 clips. Some of them are longer. Some of them are, this one is 5 seconds long, and it's just Paul saying, but it looks like he's very uncomfortable in that moment. So seems pretty accurate. And then Eddie solicits any revisions or further feedback that you might want to give him. It seems like a powerful tool for culling footage quickly, but it always takes me back to the one question. If you, the editor, don't even have time to review your footage, why do you think we, the audience, would want to see it either?
I think that it depends on the shoot ratio and what the level is. I've softened on this a little bit in the sense that I do think that there's a value in AI when it comes to grabbing footage that or cutting something together that needs to be reasonably cut together. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. I think that having one, for instance, a good example is having one camera in the back of the room for a classroom is it's a remedy for insomnia. Like, it is just so brutal. And so I think that having multiple cameras and having AI be able to kind of know where you're standing and be able to cut through it or be able to have a dialogue and have to go back and forth, I don't think it's necessarily all bad to just have something that is reasonably good that would be better than one camera or someone who's really not paying attention to it. But I think anytime you actually care about the content, you're going to still have a human being do it. But I wouldn't say that I'm now at a place where I think that it never has a place, but I just think it doesn't have as many places as I think that many people think are afraid it'll have, or many people that are creating these businesses think it'll have. Go ahead, Jesse.
I always appreciate your optimism. I just see this as a tidal wave of garbage content on every single site and social media feed that has ever existed. I try to stay as optimistic as you are, but I don't feel it in my heart.
I think that's a huge opportunity for content creators, to make something better. So the thing is that, so I think that if you're building a bunch of AI content, what happens is that, it'll trash your site. I was talking to someone about the problem we found with hybrid events when we started going back. We started doing some phone calls for people who were doing hybrid events. And what happened was that people would give us 5 out of 5 for how the event went, and then didn't come back to the next event. And we were like, that's interesting. Like they said it was great, and then they didn't come back. And so if you call those folks, you got a lot of really good information. The primary thing was they said, well, we're just busy. I just had something, I had something come up. I was kind of interested in it, but I forgot about it. I had da-da-da-da. And we saw the pattern of that process. And what we realized is that, everybody has the same amount of time. They're just not making the time for it. And we really realized that because they weren't made important in the event, they weren't, they just didn't make the event very important to themselves. And the worst part is that it's just a subconscious thing. They're just not, they're not saying there's anything wrong with it. They're just not coming back, so you're kind of burning up your audience in the atmosphere. Like every time, every hybrid event is just slowly burning off the people who are coming to those hybrid events for online. Because we're seeing that. We're seeing there are people who are not coming, they won't come back to the physical event. And we see a huge number of people that just aren't coming back. They just they're not willing to come back, but they're not finding the hybrid events very fulfilling. And as a result, the corporate entities are just losing contact with them because they don't want to come back, but they're not willing to sit and watch the other part either. They think that they're going to watch it later because there's almost no interactivity, because we're still in this old version of let's talk for 45 minutes and do 15 minutes of Q&A, which is was a disaster when we had it in person, was more of a disaster when we do it online. And so the reason I say all of this is because it's a perfect parallel to what we're looking at here. If you build lots of content, I don't think people understand how hard Mr. Beast works on his edit. Like that edit is, every single cut, whether you agree with it or not, every single cut is thought about, and everything is by more than one human. Many humans are thinking about that those cuts and how it builds and what it looks like. And as people lean more into these, what they're going to find is that more and more people, if they start, I can produce a bunch of content for my channel, I can produce a bunch of content for whatever, they're just going to lose impact with all of their audience, and it's very hard to get back. once trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback, and if you start boring people to death with the stuff that is just mediocre, you may end up with nothing there to work with, and it's very hard to rebuild. Next question.
Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada comes up next, and Chester wonders, I was watching This Week in Tech to see the new setup. I was wondering, how does Leo look and sound compared to the average Office Hours Global panelist? Seems good to me so far.
I liked his, he's got a great set. I think that they moved a lot of things in there, and I think it looks pretty good. I think he's still playing with his camera a little bit on length, focal length on the camera, but I think that he would fit right into what we're doing here. So I think he's doing a great job. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York is back with this one. I've got a terrible feedback loop in a Zoom hybrid setup. Sorry for the generality of the question, but where could it possibly be coming from?
Go ahead, Bill.
So feedback loops simply come from the fact that you have an input going to an output, and then there's some path from that output back into that input. Once that state exists, you get feedback. Now, there are things that can try to ameliorate it, but at some point you have to figure out how to break that loop or suppress the parts of the loop that are being artificially inflated, because it's a snake eating its own tail, basically, in metaphorical terms. there are feedback eliminators, but really those are all Band-Aids. What you've got to do is figure out how to patch things in a different way so that input goes to an output, and that's the end of the chain. It can go to other places. You can split it off, but once you get that output going back into the same input that originated the signal, this is always going to be a problem.
Go ahead, Jesse.
And when we're building zoom in with a zoom out at the same time, so when we're bringing people into a Zoom and then we're broadcasting to a stream, we build these all on parallel tracks. You don't want any cross-cutting, you don't want to mix your cables at all when you're bringing people into a Zoom that's going to go back out, and the people that are going back out have to see what's coming in. It occupies about 40 to 50% of our mental bandwidth when we're setting up those types of broadcasts, and I wouldn't go with any less mental bandwidth.
So I think that I'm assuming you're not getting just a squeal like a real feedback loop of a microphone, but you're hearing people echo back and forth into it. That's the most common problem that you end up with there. So what I'm guessing, because as you said, the question is a little general, but I'm going to guess what you're trying to do here is that you have people from the online audience trying to talk to people on the stage, and that can be a challenging solution for making that work. So there's a couple things you want to think about if that's what you're trying to do and you're having trouble with it. Number one is a lot of times Zoom's echo cancellation will work, but you can't delay anything. If you delay the audio in any way, shape, or form, or if there's any kind of delay in the system, it'll get out of sync, and then the Zoom echo cancellation will turn off and it'll start feeding back. And that's something that's a pretty common process. Also, if speakers are further away, you'll start to hear that as well. So one of the things that we do is we use a Dugan Auto Mix, and we put it on the speakers, on the mics on the stage and on the Zoom, and we let them attenuate each other. So when Zoom's talking, it pushes the mics down on the stage. When the stage is talking, it pushes the audio down and it takes a little bit of tuning to get that just right. And you really have to have someone who knows what they're doing to kind of get that working, or you need the time to do that. And it will change a little bit when the audience is there. And usually we try to do it, you change anything about the atmosphere. So usually we try to think through that pretty hard. If it matters, we always try to set up a break before we do a hybrid interaction, so that so that you can test it and make sure everything's working before you come in. You're not coming out of one thing on stage to a hybrid interaction. What we prefer generally, unless we have people who are really, do this a lot, and we get it right and we can do it without it. But if you're still having trouble with that, I would always try to set up a break before that so that you can test everything, make sure it's all working in the room while everybody's getting coffee and cookies. And then it works. It can work pretty well. Certain mics work better than others. And if you have handheld mics, it's going to cut off a lot of the trouble that you have there, because it's an SM58 on a stick will throw away most of the speaker stuff, and you won't get as much feedback coming in and out. So those are some of the other things that you can do, and make sure under all circumstances the person on the far end needs to be wired and needs to have headphones on. So if you're bringing someone in, if you're bringing an audience member in, it's a little harder, and we try to avoid that, but people do it. But those are some of the things to think about. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Also, we talk a lot here. Zoom does a really good job of what's called mix minus, and if you don't understand that, it is critical to this in systems. Like I said, they do a really good job, but that's the process of a lot of people are feeding into the audio mix, but when they are monitoring it, they are given everybody else and not their own channel. That's the minus in a mix minus. If that doesn't exist, this becomes an absolute nightmare. So make sure that you understand those concepts. And third time I've said it, but I'm really impressed with how well Zoom manages that for us, so we don't have to spend as much time thinking about it as we used to back in the regular manual mixing days.
Next question.
Next question comes from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, BC. Does anyone understand the Discord's pricing? Nitro subscription and the concept of boosting, which costs extra. It gets expensive. I bought a Nitro subscription thinking I could get a lot more features, but then I had to boost my own server.
Go, Jesse.
Unfortunately, we don't use Discord that way. We use it all day, every day, but we don't use it in any way that we need any more features ever. We are going to take a look at some of the features that you get with Nitro. There's Nitro Basic, and of course, no pricing is easy to find on the website. Allows larger uploads and custom emoji anywhere, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. We just don't use features like that. And Nitro Plus, even larger uploads and custom emoji anywhere.
There you go, Bill.
Yeah, Discord started out kind of as a gamers community platform, and it has developed so far. And I think they got to the point where they realized they had gazillions of subscribers, the overhead was expensive, and the rest of that. And so they were always looking for unique and interesting models for making some money that their users wouldn't be upset about. I think the basic Nitro pump is maybe a $9.95 or something like that a month. So it's not a lot. It's $100 a year. If you're on Discord a lot, it's one of those subscription things where I think, am I getting that kind of value out of it? My general feeling for Discord is yes. So I go ahead and pay the $9.95 a month. I'd probably use almost none of those things, but I just want to support the system because I think it's a well-designed, well-operated system, and that much complexity. I mean, connecting millions of people together in a service that's reliable does take some money, and so I don't resent the fact that I'm tossing a little bit into the kitty for them.
Next question.
Next comes from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. As the march of new tech accelerates, it begs the question, do we wait a bit to see what new gear can offer, or do we go with what's available now, even if it seems a bit older, and cite examples with your answer?
Go ahead, Bill.
So when to pull the trigger on new technology? And this is one of the toughest questions we have. As I learned more and talked to more people who worked at big companies, I realize they're often working on 2 or 3 or 4 versions into the future of the thing that we have access to now, which means that depending on their development cycle, it could be anywhere from 6 months to a year to 2 or 3 years before new versions come out. In holding off and saying, I'm not going to upgrade until something new comes up that's really compelling, the problem is there's so much new coming out, and the fear of missing out, FOMO as it's commonly called on the internet, causes a lot of people not to upgrade. Even if there's no marquee feature that you must have, all the little fixes along that upgrade cycle escape you, and suddenly you wake up one day and you're 4 versions back and it's not functioning the way you want to, particularly if an operating system or something like that changes underneath it. So it's hard to make the decision to go ahead and pull the trigger on something new. I suggest you look at your history, how you practice your craft, and if you can update a little more quickly than the real conservative part of you says, do so, because I've just found that every time I do from a legit company an upgrade, there are little things that do work better, and it solves me, it protects me from having the little things grow and grow and grow until they become big things. That's how I feel about it.
Go, Jesse.
We haven't had a camera release with an essential, and I mean essential feature, something that we couldn't do without as a business, since the Canon 5D Mark II, when you got a full frame sensor with 1080p ability to record video. That was it. Like, if we can't do it on a 5D Mark II, we might not be able to do it in our company. There are lots of great features, lots of great little tweaks that have been made since then. 4K is great, RAW is great, 12-bit, 10-bit is great. All that stuff is wonderful. Intra-frame codecs are great. But if you can't do it on a 5D Mark II, you might not be able to do it. So I'm not saying this to deflate anyone, just to let you know, you don't have to chase trends. That's the last bit of tech release that was essential for us to do what we need to do in our business.
Next question.
Next question comes from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. Any recommendations on mid-range standalone hardware encoders like the AJA Helo Plus, Magewell Ultra Encode AIO, Epiphan Pearl Nano? Too many bad stories about Blackmagic Design Web Presenter. Not interested in Elemental Link at this time.
Yeah, the two that I probably have the most of smaller encoders that I have the most experience with. I know we have some folks in the community that use a lot of the Epiphan Pearls. They're really happy with them. I haven't used them that much. I think I got into the Epiphan thing a little too early and got a couple extra scars. so I haven't come back to that, but I do think that they're doing a lot of really interesting things. I need to go back and take a look at those. The ones that I've used the most are the Osprey Talons and the Videon Easy encoders. These are anywhere from $1,300 to $2,500. The Osprey, I think, will do up to 3 channels. That's what you're watching this show on right now. And then the Videon Easy encoders is just 1, or you can get for a little bit more up to 4 RTMP outs. So those are the ones that we've used the most. Next question.
Eduardo Augustine in Panama City up next. I was searching for a Dante adapter to input audio into the ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, but only see those for Bluetooth, USB, and so forth. Any suggestions on how to input audio from Dante into the ATEM?
Audio into the ATEM. Yeah, I think I'm trying to, I think that, I have, this is what I have here. I have this for something else, for my speaker actually, but I happen to pull it out to use it for something else. This is the output adapter. This is 2-channel analog. It comes out as XLR, but you could easily convert these down. You'd have to figure out what your gain would be to go out of this. You couldn't just route something straight out of it because it's going to come out at a different gain than what your mixer is expecting. But this might be something. I don't think it has anything that goes out to a I don't know how else I would do that. I'd be interesting test to do of sending Dante to it. But I think it's more of what level it's coming in from that from what's coming out of this. This is going to send line out, but it's going to be line out on a pro level, not the consumer level, which is what I think the ATEM is expecting. So I think that this would work really well with an adapter if the ATEM had real inputs. So that's probably one of the few things I really hope that the new ATEMs, whenever they put them out for these smaller ones, that if they're going to call it a pro, that they give us pro inputs for the audio. We'll see. Next question.
Next question comes from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. I've been waiting for years for Sony to release a new professional camcorder, the Z200 as timecode, not genlock. Is there any way I could use this camera for IMAG against LED backdrops? I'm so sad. Someone please console me. I highly recommend that unless you really have a great LED wall, that you do everything you can not to have LED backdrops. Like they are just, you really need high quality. That's not fixing your problem here, but I just have to say that when I see LED backdrops, I mean, if you're going over 1.7 mil and you're closer than 10 feet or both of those things, I wouldn't use them. We usually put our LEDs up higher or off to the side, and we use them there, and then that becomes less of a problem. But it depends on there's a lot of different dependencies, about what will work with genlock and what won't. But I still think you're going to need genlock for it to make that actually work well. So you're going to have to find a camera with that. But I would try to avoid LED walls behind people unless you have a really, really high quality one. And you can tell us, I have a 1.7 mil or 1.5 mil or 1.2 mil. But if you've got like a 2.3 or 3.2 or 2.6, those are, as you start to go up into those ranges, you have a lot of array issues and a lot of compression issues. So just keep that in mind. Coming up, we're going to be talking about broadcast graphics here in just a second. Nick Justin just arrived. He looks better every single time that he shows up here. A quick little thing that you might be interested in. I put it up, and I think I realized I was typing it while I was in the show, and I didn't put up who it was. In Discord, we posted, we're doing a shoot next week, and we're looking for people who might want to volunteer. This is just an office hours production, but we're going to be, we have the Verve Pipe. So the Verve Pipe is, they had a single called The Freshman, and they're going to be, we're going to do a little concert with them. We did those in the past, just with Brian, the lead singer. But we're going to be doing the Verve Pipe. We're going to have the Verve Pipe. You can watch it, so be ready for that. It'll be Tuesday. I think it's going to be 3:00 in the afternoon.
next Tuesday. They're on tour and they're coming through, and we're really excited to have them. So if you're interested in being on that team, we've got a pretty good team collating already. But if you're interested in being that team, there's a form inside of Discord that you can fill out and let us know that you might be want to do a little bit of work on that. It's at a great studio. So anyway, so it's but otherwise know that it's coming, and that you should carve out that time 3 to 5 on Tuesday afternoon for a great live show with a great band. They're going to go through the entire Villains album and answer your questions and talk about it and play the songs in the studio that they recorded it in. So we're pretty excited about that. So stay tuned for that. And now we're going to slowly. This is the first time I've been back for a little while. Go to the second hour.